All right, we're live on the stream. I just need to get the links changed now. So just bear with me. I need to delete the bad one. All right, that's better. So for anybody watching, I just have to update the links now on Facebook. And I'll worry about the 835 on the 805 soon. Okay. Let me just make sure this is linking to the right place. The right place. Oh yeah, we the right place. Okay, we're good. All right, sorry about that, everyone. This is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Starting a little late tonight, I apologize, but even after selecting the proper camera on my laptop and audio source, for somehow it reverted to the virtual one again. So I'm not sure why it keeps doing that. Anyway, so I'll refocus here so anybody watching doesn't see my spinning fan over my head so much. Let me drop. There's going to be some noise on the squelch tail tonight and probably some interference. There's some weird propagation going on, and we are hearing our friends in Long Island on our frequency. So that does happen sometimes. But first, let's pause and see if there's any emergency or priority traffic tonight. Right, nothing heard except for a little interference there. Once again, this is Neil, W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Night. We meet here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. to discuss science and technology in general, not always ham radio related, but sometimes we try to make those connections where we can. Usually I am joined here by my co-host, Jim K2BHM. Jim is working on a new toy tonight, and I believe he's also finishing up dinner. I told him we will just include him in the discussion tonight, which is just a casual discussion, as I've been keeping that for the summer. We don't get quite as much attendance during the summer months, so although I do have a topic tonight, it doesn't have to go in that direction, and it's a very broad topic. We can pretty much talk about anything. Let me drop. Also, I made one change here mechanically. You should be able to, the people who are watching the stream should be able to hear the radio better. I have the audio very close to the laptop microphone now, so that should work a lot better than it was working before. I know some of the quieter people on the repeater were probably not heard well on the YouTube stream. So, all right. Let's get going here. First, Jim, if you're able to check in, go ahead and check in, and I'll put you at the top of the rotation. But like I said, I don't expect you to completely co-host tonight. That's fine. I know you have a lot going on.
I'm here, K2BHM, in the middle of dinner, so if you call me, I might have a mouthful.
That's fine. I am looking for a pen. Someone stole the pens off of my desk. Probably me. I might have to get up and go grab a pen real quick. But All right, Jim, thanks for checking in. We'll take more check-ins in a couple of minutes, but let me drop for 30 seconds while I go grab a pen, and I'll talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. All right, I am back on the OMARC Science and Technology Net, and I think I had one person watching on YouTube, but this is my my pen tonight. Is the IBM Watson pen. If anybody remembers Watson, we got a case full of these to give out at one of our expo events, technology expos. They always send us interesting promotional materials, and that one year we got these Watson pens. I still have a couple of them. So, all right, so we have Jim, K2BHM in. With the weather that we were dealing with last weekend, that preempted last weekend's net, and the terrible news from Louisiana tonight, which I actually want to keep the net short because I have been watching things, and it is definitely, a lot of hams are fascinated by weather, and it's a disaster. It's a terrible piece of news to watch unfolding, but it also fascinating because it's an interesting hurricane and how it's hitting and what's going on with it. So I thought we would talk briefly tonight about water, and that discussion can go in almost any direction. Let me drop. Water and its properties, water and its importance, water as applied to technology. There's a couple different ways you can look at water and technology. Water can be used to demonstrate technology. There's certainly plenty of analogies when we're talking about electricity and how it works that involve the flow of water and definitions such as pressure and volume. And one of the best explanations I ever saw, a pictorial of how a transistor works, used water to explain that. Technology, water. Water, basic H2O, does not conduct electricity, but most of the water we deal with in the course of our lives does, and that can be both helpful and dangerous. And actually, one of the helpful parts of that does actually affect ham radio a little bit, so we can talk about that. We can talk about the other indirect effect that water has on ham radio is propagation over water. We could talk about the mechanics of water in your homes. We certainly have had enough discussions on this repeater about plumbing and how things work in your house and how things don't work in your house, and how your well works and how the water from the street is regulated and things like that. So whatever you want to go, whatever direction, it's fine with me. But let's take check-ins, and then we can decide what direction we're going to go in. So please check in now. You check in by giving me your name, your call sign, and your location. Please come now.
Here is KD2GGS Matt in Kerhonkson. This is WA2 RKN Jerry, Hyde Park. Hello. Paul, N3UIQ in the shack. This is KD2VAH in the basement.
All right. That's 4 people. Plus Jim is 5. Nothing else heard tonight. But Jim, do you want me to keep you at the top of the rotation, Jim, or throw you in at the end?
Either one works as long as you give me a minute to clear my throat.
Now let me throw you at the end so you can kind of comment on whichever way we go here. So that brings Matt up to the top. KB2 GGF. Matt. What would you like to talk about that's wet? And I need to find out why there's a cat screaming.
Oh, I hope the cat's not wet because they don't like that.
Honey?
Good evening, everybody. The topic of water. A couple of things that have always interested me about water when I was very little. Number one is surface tension. I remember seeing water walking insects, water walkers. When I was out fishing and I was 5 or 6 years old, just being fascinated that insects could walk on top of the water and not get wet. That's pretty cool. Also, displacement. How holes displace water and things like rocks and canals and rivers. Just interesting stuff. The whole hydromechanics of water is very fascinating. But primarily, to me, I think it's surface tension. That's a really interesting phenomenon. So, those are my thoughts at the moment. So, back to Ned, KB2, GGF.
Thanks, Matt. Your signal's a little low tonight because your audio is usually low. It does make it a little difficult to hear you. Can somebody step in real quick and just run the rotation? I need to run outside. I'm not sure what's going on, but I need to go outside.
Here, I don't know who comes next, but I didn't write down the participants.
Jerry is next, followed by Paul, and then you. So, yeah, Jerry and then Paul. Sorry, folks. I just I need to figure out what's going on. It's not our cats, but there's something bad going on outside my window here.
Okay, pick it up, Jerry. Very good. Matt, yeah, water walkers, surface tension. Yeah, did you ever make the little boats where you put the piece of soap in the back and it destroyed the surface tension and it pulled the boat forward away from the soap and it just kind of propelled itself? Water, yes. Let's throw it into a technical direction here a little bit. I knew somebody who, I worked with somebody who was bringing equipment up to Mount Beacon one day, and we were installing packet stuff, and talking, and he mentioned that he liked to tune his antennas high in frequency. So when you had normal conditions, you'd get an X level of performance, whatever it is, the baseline. And when inclement weather hit and you got water on the antenna, he said it would detune it and bring it down in frequency. So kind of balance out a little bit to the performance hit due to the inclement weather. Now, I don't know how much of a benefit that he saw or, how far he detuned, but it might make for some interesting experiments for somebody who's so inclined. WA2, RKN, back to net. Yes, very interesting. I'm not sure what the dielectric properties of it would be with air composed to water.
I'm sure there's a different dielectric constant that could enter into the equations and alter the performance. Interesting. I think it goes over to Paul now.
WA2RKN comment. Dielectric constant of water is 80, which is pretty good. Back to Ned.
And I think the dielectric constant of air is 1.
Like you. Yeah. Well, it's just like the same thing. Dielectric constant of, what is it? Moisture coax is what, 80, 80, 90, something like that. So, there you go. That'll explain that one. Let me make sure it's me. I'm not sure what he had in mind with the water, but I had a HF vertical. And of course out back, being that the ground is always saturated out back, I put it out in the middle of that. And of course it made for a great, ground. That antenna worked great out there. Back to that, N3 UIQ.
Yeah, okay. I think we ran the route and it's back to me again, but let me check and see if there's anybody else that I missed.
No, as long as you hit Jerry and then Paul, you're good. I'm back, by the way, W2NDG. I'm sorry, everybody, but that was just terrifying. There was a cat, obviously, in some kind of distress outside my window, but it's gone now. All right. So since I don't know what anybody has said so far, who wants to catch me up?
I got my mouth full.
I was saying something about the damp ground and where I had my HF vertical made a great ground plane.
Frequency. I knew a guy who used to tune them high in frequency to compensate for bad weather. And surface tension of water. And water walkers. And, the little boats you make by putting a piece of soap in the back to destroy the surface tension, and it gets pulled forward by the surface tension in front of it. WA2RKN, back to that.
All right, you guys doubled, but I got most of that. And Matt, if you do have more power or more volume, just give me a quick rehash of what you were saying while the terrible noise interrupted you.
Thanks. I think my battery was low. How copy?
Oh, both stronger and louder.
Longer, yet milder. Cool. I was talking about surface tension and water walkers, and I was also talking about hydrodynamics and displacement, canal locks, boat hulls, and Jerry's mention of the little toy boats that use soap bubbles to break the surface tension. They're pulled forward by cavation, and cavation is an interesting thing too, as are laminar flow and turbulent flow, and all that other type of flows. So let me flow it on back to you. KB2 GGN, back to that.
All right, this is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Jim, thanks for taking over there. As I said, that was just was not a pleasant noise, and I didn't know what I was going to find when I went outside, but whatever it is gone. So the neighbor does have a couple of outside cats, and there's a couple of strays, but I didn't know, if another animal was attacking one or something like that. So I will check again before I go to bed. Surface tension and water walkers. I've always been as well, just, when I learned that these things were walking on the surface tension, that was always very interesting to me. And, then as a kid, playing all those games, trying to get the paper clip or the pin, to float on top of the water, to ride on the surface tension like that. I learned about detergents and their effect on surface tension from the dental business. Let me explain. When the dentist takes an impression of your teeth, one of the issues with the impression material, which is usually a goo that dries to like a hard rubber consistency, is whether or not it's capable of displacing moisture. And I can't just say water because there is other moisture coming out of your teeth depending on your condition when you're at the dentist. If the impression material doesn't displace the water, saliva, or blood, you get voids and inaccuracies. So there's impression material that is considered hydrophilic, or liking water, literally. That term got tossed around a lot when I was selling professional dental products. And what we learned is that most of the products that were claiming to be hydrophilic were not actually hydrophilic. We did sell a couple of materials that were. One of them was hydrocolloid, which is an agar or seaweed-based product. And the other was a plastic engineered in Germany. I can't remember the chemical background of it, but there was one that was considered hydrophilic. But the rest of them were not really. And the workaround is that they had added a special industrial detergent to these materials to remove the surface tension from them. So they weren't really hydrophilic, but they were more wettable. They would spread the water, basically, instead of having pockets where the moisture was. So, yes, adding soap or any kind of detergent, or there are other agents, will remove surface tension from the water, and it does give it interesting properties. I haven't heard of the boats that move on their own, though. That is kind of cool, and I definitely need to look into that. So, let me drop. And I think, as Matt had mentioned, also, as a kid, watching the streams, various places that we would hike, or when I went to camp, and there was a nice little brook flowing behind all the bunks at camp, and we would go down there, and we would build dams, and we would divert water and play with the flow and try to make a natural whirlpool in, one of the pools by getting the water to flow in a certain direction, and getting an idea of what the currents were by making a little paper boat and floating it to see, what we had changed, little things like that. Yeah, I was a nerd, but an outdoor natural nerd, I guess. Pretty cool stuff, though. And Jerry, what is the? Both Matt and Jerry mentioned it. What is the technical name of that type of boat or motion?
KB2GGF. Cavation is created by breaking the surface tension, a little empty pocket in front of the boat that the boat falls into. That's how it's pulled forward.
That is really cool. I like that. All right. And Paul mentioned water as a ground plane, and that is one of the things I mentioned, is that, yes, having an antenna near the water makes a difference, especially if it's salt water. My first HF contact as a ham was from the parking lot right at the water on the South Shore of Long Island. And you do get some really good propagation when you're near salt water. But those of you who attended our little talk we had on grounding and bonding will remember that Don talked about the differences in the quality of your ground and how it affects your system depending on the amount of moisture and the conductivity of your soil. So interesting stuff there as well. So if you live in a rather marginal area with a high water table, you're going to have completely different results with your ground than you would without it. And Jim, KD2VAH, I'm looking at my notes here, and I realized, even though I had Jim written down at the end of my list that was actually you, and I apologize. So let me throw it to KD2VAH.
I figured y'all was just going to skip me tonight because I said water and bonding. But in a way, I wasn't kidding. I was wondering the other day during all that rain, what does all that water on our end-fed wire antennas, what does it affect? Does it affect the SWRs? Does it help the signal? Does it hurt the signal? Is it bad, dangerous? Shouldn't we do it? Should we not be transmitting when it's that kind of water all over it? That was just something I was wondering.
I mean, as far as I know, as long as your antenna is sealed up correctly, there shouldn't be a huge change. But that's as they say, in a perfect world. When we talk about physics problems and quizzes and stuff like that, everything is always in a vacuum. In a vacuum and at ground level, there's all sorts of things that are assumed. I'll operate in the rain, but in a really bad storm, no, because I'm kind of worried about lightning and I'll disconnect my antenna. But rain itself in the air has an effect on radio waves. And I know it's something that I heard Dick Nadel talk about a few times on his TechNet. And I forget exactly what the effect is, but he explained that, the droplets of rain do refract electromagnetic radiation to a certain extent. And at certain frequencies, I believe, can diminish propagation, and at other frequencies can actually enhance it at times over different distances. It's not a simple answer, I guess. So, but if you know your antenna is sealed up correctly and you don't see a huge change to your SWR, and I mean huge, when your antenna is wet, then it shouldn't be an issue. Does anybody want to correct me on that? W2NDG.
KB2GGF.
Go, Matt.
Not a correction, just a comment. When my antenna gets real wet, I hook up the Jigo and I boil that water off with the raw power of 3.3 watts. Back to net.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I wouldn't use the Alex loop in the rain simply because I wouldn't want to ruin it. But yeah, QRP in the rain. How many of us use our mobiles when we're driving in the rain? It's not a huge issue as long as everything is sealed up correctly. If you've got a bad mobile antenna where the base is getting water in it and shorting out your connection, then yeah, that's going to be a problem. And that'll manifest itself in your radio either getting really hot and telling you it's getting hot, or just shutting off, things like that. I did have a bad antenna connection once, and it wasn't rain that caused the issue, but I think just a general short, and the radio actually did shut down on me, which was a good thing, because if it didn't have that kind of protection, it probably would have blown the finals. So I would Google that a little more, Jim, but as you know, like when you ask questions in some of these ham radio groups online, you'll get opposing answers and everything in the middle and 500 other variations. Back to you, VAH, just for comments.
Yeah, I was, like I say, wondering that because, like most of our antennas, they go through trees and leaves get wet, and sometimes, well, I'm sure, lean up against that section of the wire. And I just wondered. I mean, I checked the SWRs and I used the tuner, and it seems to be able to handle it. So I don't know, what it's doing. But my connections to the the ugly bun, whatever y'all call it, those are sealed up, so I'm not worried so much about that part. I just wondered about all that water on here. Though I have heard some old timers up on 80 in between cussing out the world, talk about how they use their 15 amps across there and just melt the ice that's on there. That way it takes the weight off the wire. And I don't think they were joking.
It's possible. I did some experiments as a kid with a transmitter and a length of wire in the backyard, and could get fluorescent tubes to light up and things like that. But once keyed up with my friend watching the wire to see what was going on, and accidentally knocked a poor bird that was perching on the wire off. So something was going out. He was just stunned, thank God. No birds were harmed during the course of this old story that I'm telling. And flew away 20 or 30 seconds later, but wow. It could have just been a coincidence, but I doubt it. Anyway, as a habit, if it's raining and I do try to operate at all, I usually turn the power down. I don't know if I need to. It's just been a habit of mine. So I was thinking about that as well. All right. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday night Science and Technology Net. Jim, K2BHM, any comments, or how's your food?
Thanks, Neil. K2BHM here. Finished dinner. Okay. Interesting. Thinking about the properties of water. It is a aqueous solvent. Dissolves quite a few things, and we use it for cleaning and so forth. It's non-compressible, just like hydraulic fluid, and it's a interesting source of energy. If it starts off at 100 feet high, and we bring it down to 1 foot high, it has enough force to turn a turbine or something like that and run a generator and give us some power. And on the other side, there's the potential energy or the kinetic energy. Kinetic energy being the energy of the actual bonds of the molecules vibrating back and forth. And that has some interesting properties as well. The energy level determines the temperature. Well, actually, average kinetic energy level. That determines whether it's frozen, liquid, or solid. Or frozen, liquid, or steam. Let me drop a second. So interestingly enough, measuring temperature is measuring the average. So if you have a cup of water at room temperature, there are some molecules there that the energy level is so slow that they are actually considered solid. And there are some that are so fast, they are considered in the vapor. And that is why you have a cup of water and it evaporates. And some of the liquid escapes and goes off as a gas, which is also why in the wintertime, when it's 20 below zero out, you have ice in the driveway and some of it disappears. That's called sublimation, when it goes directly from solid to vapor. So water has some interesting properties, and it's used for a lot of standards. It's used to measure a lot of things. It's, quite a deep subject. Back to you, Neil, K2BHM.
Yeah, it's certainly, there's a lot of directions you can go. The physics of it. I remember another one that always fascinated me as a kid, when they would talk about it, was capillary action. The fact that water can just draw itself up a tube. And then we learned when we studied about plants that non-vascular plants could only grow or exist up to a certain height because they were incapable of drawing the water any higher than that. Whereas vascular plants, like our trees, have special cells in them that actually transfer the water up and down. So little things. The cohesive effect of water. You take two perfectly smooth glass plates and put a few drops of water on one, and slap the other one on there, and try to get them apart. There's so many, things that we all played with as kids. The siphons and taking a glass and inverting it over a pool of water. The level of water, which somebody mentioned. I mean, there's definitely so much that can happen. And someone mentioned laminar flow tonight. And that was an interesting issue when I changed my kitchen sink recently, is because it came with a laminar flow aerator on it, which isn't really an aerator, but the fitting at the end of the nozzle there. And I don't like that. I like my water to be bubbly when it comes out of the kitchen sink. So I started looking at ways to convert it back. But one of the things I noticed, because the new sink has a very high arc to the spout, and when I shut it off, I get about a second of flow, and then dribble, drip, and then it's done. And that's because of the amount of water that's still left in that pipe. To which, my brother was telling me, then when you spend more than $170 on a, kitchen faucet set, you spend $500, $1,000, on something like this. They have special plumbing in there that will actually draw the water back when you turn off the valve, so that you get that instant cutoff. All kinds of stuff like that. Check valves that keep water only flowing in one direction, which in our... Did I make it to check valves? Sorry about that. I'm not sure where it cut me off, but this is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. The last thing I mentioned was I had said that we can use water to demonstrate electrical principles, and check valves are basically water diodes. So little things like that. I don't know if there would be a water capacitor. Would there be, Jim? I guess a heat exchanger technically you could say would be like a water capacitor.
How about the bladder tank on your well?
There you go. More like an electrolytic, right? And valves and regulators being water resistors and variable resistors. All sorts of things. I know one of the things that also came out of my time in the dental business, which fascinated me, was something called the Venturi Effect, which has to do with passing a liquid, and technically air is a liquid. But if you take a liquid and pass it through a cavity that suddenly gets wider and then narrow again, it does create certain effects. And one of them is an increase in velocity. And you can use that to do various things. And one of the things it was used for was the old dental equipment, those big stand-up ceramic-looking monsters that were in the dental offices in the 40s and 50s. Didn't have suction. Let me drop. This is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. The idea of suction being part of dentistry and using the dental assistant with suction while the dentist is operating came much later. These stand-up units did have the spit sink in them, and they had what's called a saliva ejector, that little thing that they hook onto your lip and sucks your saliva out of your mouth. And those were run entirely on Venturi suction. So it was an air-powered suction system. So it used air pressure to create a vacuum and cause suction. Interesting way of doing it. And those old ones worked great. They never really were able to duplicate that. Modern dental offices have a vacuum pump that is plumbed to each operatory, and they actually have full suction that way. So a bit of a change. But there's another one. I'll drop again. Modern suction pumps. A lot of them are what's called water ring pumps, and they use water to create suction. A spinning impeller with a ring of water around it, and a little bit of water running through it. And without the water, they don't create the vacuum. It's interesting. So let's see if there's anybody else who wants to check in tonight. The OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Please come now with your name, your call sign, and your location.
This is KB2RWW, Bob. Just checking in. I'm actually walking in through the door into my job. Good afternoon, good evening, and consider me secure.
All right, Bob, thanks for checking in. We'll catch you another night when you're not so busy. But I know you watch on YouTube when you can as well. So, all right, anybody else like to check in before we do a quick final round? All right, keep expecting the cat out there to scream when I say this, but the cat will check in. Let's run around real quick. And like I said, I know it was a short night tonight. We could probably go on for hours on this subject, as I just demonstrated. There's so much to talk about, but I really do want to end it early tonight because I want to get back to monitoring what's going on in the world, and also had a busy weekend, and tomorrow is Monday. So, Jim, K2BHM, any final comments on the last round here?
Yeah, thanks, Neil, K2BHM. Yeah, Venturi's, that's a whole other topic in itself. It's basically dependent on the flow of two different things. They can be the same density or different densities, and the ratios are pretty much what controls it, because there are Venturis that pass air and aspirate water, and there are ones that pass water and aspirate air, and there are ones that pass air and aspirate air and pass water and aspirate water. It's quite a interesting technology and very adaptable, very usable. You find them everywhere. Like you were saying, in the dentist office, you have air passing through to evacuate water, saliva. We won't go there. And then in your heating system, the older heating systems, you had water passing through a Venturi that would generate a lower pressure and suck water out of the radiator, so that it would take hot water off of another section in a T and circulate it through. So quite an interesting dynamics there. Not that it has much to do with electronics, although, I don't know, maybe it has an application that we haven't explored yet. We'll have to think about that one. Back to you, K2BHM.
Actually, this is some electronic industry trivia here, but it does have a connection to the electronic industry. I don't know if you know of that, but there is a use of the word and actually the technology is a bit of a stretch, but yes, in electronics. And do you know what that is?
I'm thinking maybe microwaves, a circular mixer or something of that nature, or possibly, having a brain fart here, but definitely there are other applications that could possibly be a corollary.
It's one of those little things. I only happen to know about it because my brother owned a set of these things. But there was a company, BIC America, that made a line of speakers called Bic Venturi, and they were using the Venturi principle to accelerate the air of a bass driver and produce more bass out of the speaker than the cabinet would normally allow. And it worked. Old speaker technology, regular paper surround woofers, but they made a whole line of these things. Unfortunately for the company, they were using terrible tweeters, and they just kept blowing like crazy. But years later, the company came back and tried to market the technology again, but the quality was shoddy, and it didn't really go anywhere. But yeah, Bic Venturi speakers. They're from the late 60s, early 70s, I guess, and you can probably find them on eBay once in a while, but they always need work. Even the crossovers were prone to frying. But yeah, home audio, the Venturi and home audio. Back to you, Jay.
Okay, and on the other side of the coin, my dad had some speakers called Duquesne Ionovacs, and you had the standard 8-inch or 12-inch woofer in them. And when it came to the tweeter, that was a quartz tube that had a 27 megahertz power oscillator in it that would strike an arc inside the quartz tube, and it would generate an ionized column of air. And they wrapped a voice coil around it, and that column of air had virtually negligible mass or inertia, so they would modulate that column back and forth, and they could get frequency responses up to 40 kilohertz.
Oh, that's really cool. I think we could definitely do a discussion on audio one night, for sure, because even speaker technology alone, there's certainly some very unique things and things that don't exist anymore, things that were tried and failed. But remind me, I think we need to do that one night. We'll talk about audio, because a lot of hams are also into audio. So, all right, thanks, Jim. Matt, KB2GGF, any end of the net comments?
Thanks, Neil. KB2GGF here. Your comments about using water to explain transistor function reminded me that the Brits and I think quite a few other Europeans use the term valve instead of tube. So that sort of clicked with me. Yeah, this is water you could go on with forever. There are so many things. But earlier, Jim BHM was talking about how effective water is at transmitting energy. It certainly is in all its forms, all water's forms. And it's also a great reflector of energy. So, it's a really dynamic and interesting stuff. Nice discussion tonight. Thank you for doing the net, and have a good evening, everyone. 73.
Comment? Quick comment, K2BHM.
Go ahead.
Lest we forget, water has a resonant frequency. You have the oxygen atom and the two hydrogen atoms bonded at a approximately 120-degree angle. And that has a resonant frequency of 2.54 gigahertz, which is why the microwave oven works. You are bombarding the water molecules at the resonant frequency with a substantial power, and you increase their energy level, and they get hot.
Oh, great addition there. Thank you. And I'll throw this out there. I had meant to mention this before when I got distracted. If you want some humor about water, with all the people, screaming about how this is unsafe and that is unsafe and everything is unsafe, there are some people who look into the humorous side of it. There's a website I'll recommend. It's called DHMO. That's Delta, Hawaii, Mexico, Oklahoma, DHMO.org. DHMO.org. And what it is it's the website for awareness of dihydrogen monoxide and its dangers. It's a great website. It's like a parody of websites that get thrown up telling you how dangerous your shampoo is, or an ingredient in your antiperspirant, or because everybody seems to latch on to something like this at some point. It's a whole website talking about the dangers of dihydrogen monoxide, which is just another way of naming water, and it's funny. It's right up there with a website that doesn't exist anymore that I used to send people to, which was Persons for the Ethical Treatment of Vegetables. So with that, Jerry, WA2RKN, how are we doing tonight? What are your final thoughts for the net?
Nice. Yeah, laminar flow, turbulent flow. Let me throw this one out in. Reynolds number. It's nice to have a conversation with knowledgeable people. The bond angle for water and hydrogen, I had thought from, high school chem many moons ago, was about 103 degrees. So I went over to Wikipedia, and they claim it's a 104.5 degrees bond angle for the hydrogen and the oxygen. And the Venturi speakers, would these speakers have suffered from chuffing? Like a steam locomotive, from the passing of the wind through the restriction. WA2RKN back to that.
Is this where Jethro Tull got the name of their song Locomotive Breath? One has to wonder. Now, good stuff, Jerry. And there are certainly physical problems and properties and things that we could go on forever about. There's certainly lots of things that have always fascinated me. We could have, and we talked about light one night, I think, and you can go on about that as well. And, everything has that interesting side of it. So cool stuff. Paul, N3EYQ, any final comments tonight?
Not necessarily. I was just listening in. Interesting topic, to say the least. And of course, I heard you mention something about what I threw out there too. It basically all has to do with what your ground is like. N3EYQ.
No, it's true. And like I said, Don Kane kind of wrapped it back, to explain how it affected grounding. So, and well, for you, Paul, in your area, we could talk about water management. That's another thing, around here. I know when we were doing one of the weather nets, somebody checked in from Sawkill and mentioned that the Sawkill Creek was okay, that it hadn't really risen much. And for those of you that didn't grow up in Woodstock or Sawkill or that area, it probably didn't mean much. But for me, somebody who did grow up in the area, hearing that the Sawkill Creek hasn't risen is a big change from when I was a kid, because it used to be that if you looked at it funny, it would overflow. That poor neighborhood there on Sawkill Road, all those little ranch houses right on the creek. God knows how many times those houses saw water back in the 60s and 70s. But I believe the Army Corps of Engineers managed to fix the Sawkill. And the reason I was mentioning it for Paul is because there's a huge Army Corps project in Rosendale where they fixed the creek going right through Rosendale. The Wallkill is still a problem. It's a strange river. They claim that it flows backwards. That's a subject for another night. But the Wallkill floods easily. But there's a lot of these little flood control projects around. There's one you Kingstonites want to see behind Kingston Plaza. If you go back behind the plaza, you can see how they kept the creek from destroying that part of Kingston over there. So cool stuff. Jim, KD2VAH, any closing comments for us?
Just a real quick one.
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I've seen that creek about 2 feet from the top, or less than 2 feet from the top, for overflowing that dike. Oh, well, N3UIQ when I worked there.
Yeah, I have pictures of the 587 overpass over the creek with the water touching the metal girders on the bottom of the overpass, the bridge there. So anyway, Jim, VAH, if you're still there, or are you coffeeing?
No, when I was young, my sister lived with family up there in Woodstock, so I would go and spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks sometimes in the summer from wherever I was. And matter of fact, one of the times was right during Woodstock. And but anyway, it would rain, and you're right about that creek. I mean, because my uncle, he was big into that. Let's take a ride and go see the masses. That's why we all went down to Woodstock, see all the hippies. They had another word for them at the time. I can't remember. Beatniks, I believe my uncle called them. Beatniks. But yeah, that creek, that creek would overflow if some lady got upset about a flower dying and started crying. I don't know what they've done to it, but apparently it's not overflowing as much these days. Anyway, back to that.
Yeah, as a kid, I can remember getting sent home from school a couple of times early for floods, more than a couple of times. And one time they waited long enough that it was a problem. And they tried to put together a couple of bus routes for the kids that could still get to their houses because the water had risen so fast. So they started putting kids on alternate bus routes where they couldn't get to their houses. And then they had a whole bunch of teachers just calling phones, and calling because the phones were still working, and calling parents and saying, your children are being sent to so-and-so's house, and so on and so forth, because that's the best they could do. And even I remember my bus trying to get around one of those little flood spots and actually having to drive through a portion of the creek on Sawkill Road at one point. But yeah, I grew up with a lot of water, even in the house, because those houses on Whitney Drive were built on top of water. Once again, another story. But all right, fun stuff, folks. I'm sorry I had to cut it short tonight, but I think we're all happy just to get back to our lives. I do enjoy these little sessions, and we'll come up with some more topics. September, there will be 2 Saturdays in a row where I will not be around. So we can either not do the net or talk about Jim doing it by himself, or if somebody else would like to step up and talk about something and do the net with Jim. But Jim, you're going away as well. When are you going away?
We'll be leaving, 8th of September and coming back, like 19th of October. I'm going to be going away. The doctor is writing me a prescription for saltwater therapy on the beaches of St. Martin for my back. So, and getting back to the Sawkill. Yeah, we live on Glenary Lake. We've got 150 feet of water frontage. And it's interesting, you look out at the lake, and in the morning, the nice little ripples show you that the water is flowing from right to left. And at night, you can see that the water is obviously flowing from left to right. But basically, a mile or so off to the left is a set of rapids, and a mile or so off to the right is a dam. And so the water can only go one way. So Obviously, going one way at one time and one way the other time is strictly the pressure of the wind and its effect on the water. So that is something not to be underestimated either. Anyhow, back to you. Interesting conversation tonight, K2BHM.
Great. And thanks for clarifying on the dates. So the 12th and the 19th, neither of us will be here. I might be coming back on the 19th, but I don't think I'm going to be in any condition to create and run a net that night. So I'll be on the road for about 9 days in a row. So if anybody wants to run a net on the 12th or the 19th, they're welcome to. And I'll also put that out on a couple of the other nets, but otherwise we're going to be skipping. So we will be here next weekend on the 5th. I'll be a little tired because it's Stormville weekend, but I will do next Sunday's net. And then I won't be back after the 5th until the 26th. So thank you, everybody, for checking in tonight. Let me drop, and I will close the net. This has been the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net, heard here on the repeater at 146.805 of the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club. You do not need to be a member of the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club to participate in this net or any of our other activities that we have on this repeater, but we do encourage you to check us out. If you're listening tonight and are not a member, please go to the website, omarcclub.org, omarcclub.org, and check us out. We operate now 5 regularly scheduled nets on this repeater. Let me drop. Every morning at 8:35 a.m., a rotating crew of hams initiated by Paul, AC2UQ, and he does most of the nets, do the 8:35 on the 8:05, a morning check-in net started at the beginning of the COVID pandemic by Paul. A way that we could be social without being social in person. And hams are social creatures. And Paul started the net because he wanted to make sure everybody was okay and everybody had what they needed and make sure that we were communicating regularly, because not all of us were okay. We kind of needed it, and it was a good thing to have. And it's a casual net, a round table, not a directed net. Every night at 6:30, a rotating group of OMARC people run the 6:30 check-in net, similar to the 8:35 net. Usually runs 2 rounds and is over in time for you to have a little supper, or you can do this after dinner if you eat early. I know Dave likes to say it's quick and goes well with a cup of coffee. It's a casual directed net, basically where we talk about what we did during the day, what we're going to do tomorrow, and whether or not we need any assistance with anything. Let me drop. Every Tuesday at 8 p.m., we are starting an emergency services net, talking about getting the club involved in areas and races again, which are the amateur radio emergency services. And that is usually run by Brad. I'm not sure. I think Brad mentioned on Facebook that he might not be able to do the net for a while, but somebody will be running that net on Tuesday nights. Thursday nights at 8 p.m., our president, Dave, K2JLV, runs the Thursday night technical net, and that's a net where we usually pick up topics related to ham radio most of the time. People check in, we run around, see if anybody has anything they have questions about or want to talk about. If not, Dave spins the topic wheel and comes up with a topic for us, and we usually run several rounds on that, talking about something technical or solving somebody's issue. Great net. Always a lot of fun. And then, of course, this net every Sunday night. We are working on a DMR net on the local Hudson Valley DMR talk group. It hasn't settled into a regular time slot yet, but it is mentioned on the nets. And if you're an OMARC member, usually mentioned through our email system. So let me drop again. This is W2NDG. On the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net, we are closing the net and returning the repeater to regular amateur use. I am ending the YouTube stream now. Good night, everybody. And as usual, I'll hang out for 5 or 10 minutes if anybody wants to chat. Have a good night.